Hello, everyone. My name is Gerald III, and I am a Client Experience Manager at Davis Wright Tremaine. Thank you all for joining Legal Value Network's webinar. Before I introduce you to the program and its panelists, let me say a few words about the organization that brings this content to you. The Legal Value Network is a growing community of more than 800 business of law professionals. LVN's board and numerous volunteers are all working together to bring its members curated content by way of webinars, the Council of Luminaries series, a monthly e-newsletter, its Off the Clock podcast, and the recently published Legal Pricing and Practice Management Survey. LVN is also providing ways for this community to engage with one another through its roundtable programs, its Women's Initiative Forum, and of course, through its annual conference that is set for October 6th through 8th, 2021 in Nashville, Tennessee. Today's session is brought to you by the LVN Webinar Committee, comprised of 15 individuals who have been working for months to develop a full slate of 2021 educational offerings for LVN members. Content is focused on 3 educational tracks: 1, innovation; 2, pricing and LPM; and 3, beyond the technical. Today's webinar is a part of the innovation track. If you are not yet an LVN member, visit legalvaluenetwork.com and select the Become a Member tab and sign up today to ensure you continue to enjoy all the offerings. And be sure to follow LVN on LinkedIn and Twitter. Now, just a few housekeeping items. The only video feed you are going to see is that of the presenters. Everyone will be on mute except the presenters. Opinions and information shared here are those of the presenters unless otherwise stated. We will record this session and it will be available on legalvaluenetwork.com soon after this event. And finally, questions are very much encouraged. So please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar to post your questions. We will get to those after the presentation, so please engage with the content. With all that settled, let's get to our program titled Adventures in Change Management. Please welcome Melissa Speidel, Director of the Business Transformation Office at K&L Gates, Erin, the Knowledge Management Lead in the Corporate, External, and Legal Affairs Department at Microsoft, and Katrina, Jasaitis, Senior Manager of Legal Transformation and Innovation at HBR Consulting. We'll roll through the introductions and short background in the order our speakers will present. So let's start with Melissa, then on to Erin and Kate.
Thank you so much, Gerald. My name is Melissa Speidel. I am with K&L Gates. I am the Director of the Business Transformation Office, the Acting Director of the Enterprise Applications and Development Team, and overseeing the practice support team. That's about 45 individuals at the firm, and we really manage the life cycle of a project or initiative. So, at the beginning, we have our project portfolio managers, our project managers, our business analysts, our application engineers and developers, and our support personnel. And really, we're the problem solvers for the firm. I joined the firm almost 8 years ago, and I don't come from a background of legal. I come from healthcare, finance, and higher education. So this has been a wonderful journey, and I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Gerald. My name is Erin, and I'm part of the Corporate, External, and Legal Affairs, or CELA, Productivity Solutions team. We use out-of-the-box Microsoft tools like SharePoint, M365, and the Power Platform Suite to build innovative solutions that are aimed at supporting and increasing productivity for our CELA colleagues. I also lead several departmental knowledge management initiatives.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Jasaitis, Senior Manager at HBR Consulting. So I am part of our Legal Transformation and Innovation group, and I also lead HBR's Business Design Studio that's powered by Bull Duck. I've got a long-standing history in legal, almost 20 years now. I'm sad to admit it out loud, but I got my start way back when, right out of college as a paralegal, and have just been plugging along the way since then and had a variety of roles in innovation and technology. So I'm excited to speak to you guys today about our wonderful topic of adventures in change management.
Thank you all for those introductions. I'll introduce myself quickly and we'll roll into our content. As I mentioned earlier, I am a client experience manager at Wright Tremaine, also known as DWT. I've been at DWT for just over 4 years now, after finishing law school in Boston. My role now consists of a mix of account manager responsibilities mixed with innovative solution design and alternative pricing work. I focus my efforts on the firm's largest clients with whom we have great opportunities to rethink the way we engage and support their businesses. I manage a growing team of driven project managers, technologists, and data visualization specialists. Together, we make up a diverse, holistic legal operations group. Today, we're going to discuss the people side of innovation. Our speakers will highlight lessons they've learned through their journey getting lawyers, clients, and other stakeholders to change the way they operate for the better. Now I'll turn it over to Melissa to kick off our discussion. Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gerald. And just give me a moment here. While we did practice sharing our screens, I want to make sure that I am doing it accurately. So here we go. So I'm hoping that I'll wait for thumbs up from my panelist friends here. Okay, we're ready to go. So first of all, I'd like to thank the LVN Committee for inviting me to talk to you today about something I'm very passionate about. And a very, very special thank you to Gerald, who has given us a great deal of his time and patience as we prepared for the session. And on a side note, it's also been my pleasure to work with Erin and Kate on other engagements. So I'm just so thrilled to be here amongst friends. So I wanted to start with my journey to change management. And I think it starts with a quote from Henry Ford. The only real mistake is one in which we learn nothing. And I'm going to share with you what I can honestly say has been the biggest failure of my professional career to date, and I hope forever. But I was at the firm about 4 years ago. We were working on implementing a new document management tool. Our timeline for the project was very tight. We had 6 months to implement a new system, to migrate millions of documents, and to, of course, communicate and train 3,800 users. Because of those constraints, certain steps and aspects of the project were completely overlooked or simply dropped. Most notably, our focus on the end users and what this project and how this project would impact them. The date of our implementation and our global cutover arrived, and as you can imagine, things went sideways extremely quickly. In order to meet those deadlines, we focused mostly on the technical aspects. We configured servers, we migrated documents, we implemented ethical walls, and we focused on integrations. But without focus on our end users, our people were lost. We never adequately defined and communicated what the project was, why we were making the change, who needed to change how they worked, and really what was going to change. About 2 weeks after that initial go live date, I received a call from a member of our management committee, and she was understandably very frustrated and upset. And she started with the questions: who did you talk to? What lawyers did you talk to? Who did you develop this training with? Who did you talk to about the workspace design? And as that list grew, I realized I was in an indefensible position. We didn't talk to anybody. So hence my journey to change management came out of a very large failure. So given our time constraints today, I'm not going to go into how to build out a change management program. I'm not going to talk about the methodology or processes. I wanted to focus on what change management is and why it's so integral to the delivery of successful organizational outcomes. Erin and Kate will be sharing some more relevant real-world examples of applying change management to projects and initiatives later on. So if you take one thing, just one thing away from my portion of today's presentation, let it be this: organizational outcomes are the collective result of individual change. I promise you'll hear me say this phrase throughout the presentation. I encourage you to play buzzword bingo and really kind of count how many times I do say this. So as you read through this slide, I think we all know that the project landscape is full of initiatives that are on time, on budget, and meet those technical requirements, but still fail to deliver expected results and outcomes. I think the project teams are often quick to lament and try to blame. They'll say, lawyers just hate change, or lawyers don't have the time to change, or lawyers just don't understand technology. While I'm using lawyers in this example, working in other industries, you can say doctors don't have time to change, professors hate change, or executives don't understand technology. And blaming underwhelming organizational outcomes on the individual's lack of ability, technical acumen, or time constraints is antiquated and quite honestly incorrect. Supporting organizational outcomes and expectations of delivering a successful, say, ERP or CRM system, focusing only on the technical aspects of the project and assuming people will just change because you say so is a disaster waiting to happen. Remember, organizational outcomes are the collective result of individual change. So what you're looking here is the 5 tenets of change management. And those results and outcomes of workplace changes are intrinsically and inextricably tied to individuals really doing their jobs differently. Change management enables individuals to understand, grow, adopt, and sustain a change so that the business objectives are realized. So how does change management lay the groundwork for successful projects and initiatives? To answer this question, it's really necessary to establish the foundational tenets for change management. This grounding in the reality of how change actually happens will enable a better understanding and more robust application of the tools and processes for managing the people side of change. And when you see here, each of these 5 tenets listed build on each other, and together they form the basis for what and the what and the why of change management. So what we're looking at here is the UVP, or the Unified Value Proposition. And that UVP shows the technical side here and the people side of change here, and how we must harmonize these to ultimately deliver success. If you reflect back on my failed document management project, you're probably thinking a lot of things. Mostly, how do I still have my job here? But I said we designed and we delivered the technical solution successfully, and we came in on time, on budget, and within the scope of the original project, but we still failed because we didn't focus on the people side of the project. Please know that I'm not downplaying the importance of project management. I do manage project managers, but I think we often will walk away from that project and judge the success of it based on that project management triangle and that scope, time, and cost. But then we sit around and we wonder why people aren't using the system or why they went back to doing their jobs the same way they used to. That's because we spent all of our time on that technical side of the project and we didn't do enough. And we thought that if we just told them to go to training, that everybody would and the change would successfully come. Well, I think you know that that's incorrect now. If you think about when we talk about project management and that triangle project management of time, scope, and cost, I think that successful projects need a 4th paradigm, and that's people. So we take the project management triangle and we turn it into the project management / change management square. And why is it important? In my example of the failed document management implementation, we went from current state. We started to lose people here in transition because we weren't communicating, we weren't understanding and defining impact, we weren't telling them how to do their job differently. So when we hit future state, we had what we call Swiss cheese. We had little pockets of adoption here and there, but ultimately we had little success. With change management, we can move through each of these states to ultimately achieve success. So again, I often think times people in leadership positions may be resistant to building out change management skills or teams. I had a C-level executive say to me one time that they felt it was mumbo jumbo and a bunch of fluff, and that is an exact quote. But to counter that argument, I wanted to say I shared some very compelling data with him. And by looking at this slide here, by just applying fair change management, I'm not saying you're change management expert, just fair change management, you've increased the likelihood 3 times of meeting or exceeding your project objectives. If you're really good at it, we're up here at 93%. That's not a bad data point to share. And some additional data points that I shared was just by applying some good change management principles, we can increase the likelihood that that project is on or under budget by 70%, and it's on or ahead of schedule at least 52%. That's not a bad return on investment. So how do you build change management readiness? I think you want to start small. So start with how you can connect people to success. And it can be as simple as defining these 4 Ps of project, purpose, particulars, and people. It's really at the start of your project, starting that elevator pitch that we're all used to giving. And defining the 4 Ps helps to understand the what, the why, and the who will be impacted by the change. If people don't change how they do their jobs, then we ultimately won't achieve what we set out to at the beginning. Remember, organizational outcomes are the collective results of individual change. Another important step as you're starting on your change management journey, and especially on a new project or initiative, is to define the groups and individuals that will be impacted by the change, and measuring how this effort will impact them as a group or even as an individual. If you're implementing an ERP or a new billing system, maybe Nancy is your entire group. Or maybe there's 100 people across the world that do billing. And it doesn't matter if it's 1, 100, or 1,000. Understanding impact will help you build out a successful change plan. Defining impact helps bring the change into focus for the individuals and provides clarity on what adoption and usage looks like. By defining impacts, you can understand the beliefs and feelings that people have, enabling you to identify those areas of support, which is very important, but even more importantly, the areas of resistance. And engaging directly with impacted people and groups can be very helpful in gaining insights into impact, and can also be a powerful way to encourage people to participate in the change process. And right here, we're just looking at those 10 aspects of change. So anything from location to job roles to tools to systems, this is what people care about. And understanding that and documenting that is so critical. And I've talked a lot about change management, and I'm a ProSci certified change manager. And one of ProSci's kind of tenets is ADKAR. And what is ADKAR? ADKAR really describes the 5 key building blocks an individual needs to successfully make a change. The model states simply that for somebody to effectively change in their role, they need awareness of the change, the desire to make the change, the knowledge on how do I change, the ability or skills to change, and then the reinforcement to help sustain the change. And I think lastly is understanding that people change at different paces is a really important aspect of change management, because people have different strengths and weaknesses, and building out a successful change management plan ensures that everybody can be successful. And I just wanted to thank you again. This was very quick, and if anybody would ever like to have a deeper conversation on change management, you can reach me here. And if you want more information on ProSci's change management, please go to prosci.com. And I think I'm going to then turn this over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for that technical background on what change management is and how to develop and engage a plan with stakeholders effectively. So Erin, can you share with us some of the best practices you've developed during your change management journey?
Yes, I'm off mute, yes.
Yes,
okay, perfect. Well, first of all, huge thank you to LVN for having me here to talk today, and huge thank you to Gerald for moderating and for all of your help in preparing. So I'm Erin Lettire. I'm with the Corporate External and Legal Affairs Department at Microsoft, which is also known as SELA. And I'm very excited to share with you today some of my adventures in change management. So successful organizations look for ways to continually improve. One way to accomplish this is through innovation. We're often asked to do more with less, and innovation helps us to be more efficient and effective, and it frees up time spent on manual and time-consuming processes so we can focus on more complex issues and rewarding work. Innovation necessitates change, and successful adoption of innovation projects requires change management. Now let's look at some of the potential risks to successful change adoption, which I know that Melissa talked about a little bit in her presentation. So most people don't want to change how they work for a variety of reasons. They feel like they're too busy to invest the time needed to learn or commit to a new tool or process. And they're comfortable with the familiar. It's known, even if it's not optimal. Some people are uncomfortable with new technology and learning new skills. They like being the experts, and they don't want to invest in learning new ways of doing things that have speculative personal benefit. They want to know what's in it for me. Many in the legal profession are risk adverse, and for good reason. I mean, it's part of the profession, and so it's kind of deeply ingrained. So now that I've talked about that, let me go into some tools for successful change management that I picked up through my experience in developing innovative solutions and witnessing the experiences of my in-house colleagues. So first off, clarity of purpose is very important. You want to develop a mission statement, a vision, and goals up front. This ensures that you're solving the right problem and that we stay on target, and also helps to demonstrate the value of this change from the beginning. Leadership support is also incredibly important. Leadership needs to show their encouragement for support and support for the change. They need to talk the talk and walk the walk, otherwise no one else will. Communication is key. Start early and communicate often. Give people time to mentally prepare for the upcoming change and help to answer the question, what's in it for me? Why is this change necessary? And what's the value that stakeholders will receive from adoption? Project transparency is also important, as this helps stakeholders to stay informed on the changes that will be coming, and it makes it a bit easier for them to mentally prepare. It's really, really important as well to put together a diverse and inclusive project team. You want to take stakeholders' different perspectives and different pain points and different ideas for solving a problem into account. This helps to ensure that stakeholders feel a sense of agency, and people are much more likely to support change if they feel like they have a voice and that they're part of the process. Also, be sure to take your organization's culture into account. Remember, it's people first, then process, then technology. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for transforming an organization. You need to understand your audience, and you need to reach them on their level, because people want to feel like they have a say in the change, even if it doesn't ultimately land where they want it to. Also, it's good to minimize context switching and cognitive load by meeting people where they are and where they're comfortable to the best extent possible. Keep it simple when you can. Avoid over-engineering and overcomplicating. I'm now going to share 2 case studies with you from my time within SELA. The first is an example of an iterative approach to innovation and change management with several lessons learned along the way on how to drive more effective change adoption. In this first case study, I'll talk about my experience with the development and launch of our feedback collection tool. We wanted to develop a tool to solicit feedback from our SELA colleagues on their engagements with service providers to help monitor and improve the relationships that SELA has with its providers. For the pilot, we pulled together all data on our SELA engagements into an app that we developed, where each person would be provided their list of engagements on which to provide feedback. In the first iteration, we included all historical engagement data for a year. And for some people, this meant a very long list of engagements that required quite a bit of context switching and cognitive load. People would have to think back to multiple historical engagements and their experiences during each in order to provide feedback. We required people to use a specialized app to submit this feedback as well. And not only was the interface unfamiliar, but people also had to navigate away from what they were doing to submit their responses. This resulted in a small response rate and very generalized responses. For our second iteration, we tried to simplify and not over-engineer as much. We also listened to feedback from the pilot when developing the second iteration, We made the decision to request feedback through a new tool and a new process. We sent requests to a smaller subset of people, and we followed up with them to ask for their opinions on the process and triggers. So we were starting to become more aware of the importance of stakeholder agency, which I know Melissa also spoke about. We communicated why we were asking for the feedback and the value that SELA stakeholders would get from their participation. So we were also starting that communication plan, although a little bit later than we probably should have. We implemented more restrictive controls, and the engagements below a certain threshold or outside of a specific period of time, this time it was a quarter instead of a year, were left off. This resulted in a smaller set of engagements for people to provide feedback on. We asked people to provide feedback this time by completing a form that we sent via an email link. While the interface was more familiar for them and they received the request via email, where many of our SELA colleagues do a lot of their work, again, they had to navigate away from what they were doing to submit requests. This resulted in a better response rate and more targeted responses, but it still wasn't ideal. On to our third iteration, where we really tried to meet people where they are and where they're comfortable to reduce the context switching and cognitive load. So we started this time by including a team of SELA professionals in the planning for the new feedback collection experience, the look and feel of the requests, and the triggers for sending a request. We wanted to make sure that we were actually giving our stakeholders a sense of agency this time. We then took the feedback from the stakeholder team and worked with engineering to develop a tool that sends requests via email in a much more timely fashion when an engagement has reached a certain monetary threshold or when an engagement has been marked as closed. SELA professionals now complete a feedback request within the actual email, thus not requiring them to navigate away from where they're doing a good deal of their work. The requests are tailored to a specific engagement and they're sent at a meaningful time when engagements reach a certain threshold or if it's just closed, which means the experience is still fresh in their mind and it's much less time consuming to submit feedback on one engagement at a time. We're still early in our launch of this iteration, but we already have a much higher response rate than the previous iterations, and the feedback is much more aligned with the specific experience. My next case study is an example of an innovation project that was incredibly successful, in which our intellectual property group implemented an end-to-end cloud-hosted IP management system to replace the existing tools and refresh the processes that were supporting IP management. Microsoft, led by the Director of IP Operations who managed the project, received the 2020 Financial Times Intelligent IP Award, and the IP management platform has an overwhelmingly successful adoption rate. So why did the team decide to change their tools and processes? Well, the original tools were outdated, they didn't play well together, and there was widespread stakeholder dissatisfaction. With such a high volume of work spread across multiple teams and organizations within Microsoft, such an extensive group of stakeholders with numbers in the hundreds, they knew it was time for a change. They recognized the need to innovate, but how does one bring people along on the journey, especially with such a large and varied group of stakeholders? Well, first, they made sure that they had clarity of purpose. They developed a mission statement and goals, and they clearly articulated the why surrounding the change. Why are we doing this? Why does this need to occur? Then they made sure that they had leadership support. They included people from leadership on the project teams, and senior leadership provided direct communication as to why the change was important. They made the project and the associated work part of people's core priorities, and they recognized those that put in significant time and effort. They also tried to shift other responsibilities and commitments when possible to give the participants the time and ability to engage, because everyone does have so much on their plates all the time. They also made sure that they started to communicate early and often. They communicated their mission and goals. Leadership communicated their support at regular intervals. They communicated their projects and their milestones regularly, and they had frequent meetings with stakeholders. They also made sure that their project had transparency by creating a project site where anyone could come and view what the team was working on and the project status. They made sure to build an extensive project team of stakeholders or with stakeholders from every group that would be using the tools or play a part in the process. They wanted to understand from every angle what success should look like and what could potentially stand in the way. This ensured representation of different roles and mindsets. They also gave their stakeholders a voice and agency in the decisions and development. They made the tool selection process democratic and everyone was given a vote. They wanted people to feel like this was their process and solution, and that they have ownership versus someone coming in as a change agent and forcing change upon them. I would like to note here that it's important to include change-averse stakeholders in this group. They'll help to point out potential risks and issues. And not only are these good to take into consideration when building a process or a tool so that you can account for them early on and put steps in place to mitigate risk, but you also build credit with them for listening and taking their concerns into account. And finally, they were sure to take Microsoft's culture into account. Microsoft's full of brilliant and talented people, and they are encouraged to speak up and share their opinions. This made it even more important to make sure that stakeholders felt like they had a part in the project and decision-making process. It was crucial to be inclusive of a variety of viewpoints in order to drive a deep level of engagement. Remember, each organization has its own culture, and what might work for one may not for another. So it's important to keep this in mind when you're interacting with your stakeholders. You want to be sure that you understand the audience and reach them on their level. The IPG team, taking all of these considerations into account, led to overwhelmingly successful adoption and user satisfaction rates, close to 100% for adoption and over 80% for user satisfaction. In addition, time to filing has been halved, and the IP team has saved millions on IT spend and maintenance costs, which sounds to me like quite the successful project. I hope that some of the experiences and lessons learned that I've shared today have been helpful. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And I will now hand it over to Kate.
Thanks, Erin. All right, now it's my turn to see if I can master the sharing of the screen. No, just always. So I'm gonna get a thumbs up from everyone. You see? Good to go?
Yep.
All right. So you guys have heard so many awesome information and key talking points from our presenters thus far, and I'm going to bring us home really focusing on kind of one key aspect to change management and adoption, which is communication. It's really near and dear to my heart. I have been in the trenches and throes of technology implementations for a very long time. I've also held a lot of different roles in innovation and adoption and change. And one of the things that I experience so often, and Melissa, Erin, I'm glad you guys brought this up, is focusing on the people first is such an important aspect. And not only the people, but their human element, their emotions, their feelings around the change that's going to happen, and getting them that awareness and desire of the change. Can't tell you how many times I've worked with firms where they're like, we're not getting any adoption from this technology solution. It's terrible. We're ripping it out. And when talking to them a bit more to find out, okay, what's really going on, you don't have an adoption problem. You have an awareness problem. People don't know that this solution exists or why they need to use it or, what is expected of them. That's your problem. And so we have to start from the beginning. We need to relaunch. So that's really what I'm focusing on today. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the change experience. So again, taking notes from Melissa and Erin, focusing on the people first. So we design our change experience starting with the human first. A lot of times when we go into these implementations, technology implementations, or whatever the case may be, and Melissa, you spoke about this, is you focus on the process, you focus on the technology solution, and you design the whole project around that and forget that there's actual people at the end that have to use this. So the approach that I take is we're going to reverse that. Before we even look to start an implementation with a piece of technology, we're going to talk to people. We're going to go out and talk to the users and the consumers of this solution. What is their experience to date? What has worked? What's not? What's frustrating? You'd be surprised at how honest they are. I am never surprised anymore when I get on the phone with some of these stakeholders and the amount of information they're willing to share about their experience with something. And that's pivotal because it helps you then put together that communication. It's also important to put together a story of why. So Melissa talked a little bit about this too, the business case around why are we doing this? What's in it for me? Why do I care? So that story of why is really important to craft, and it needs to be succinct, almost like an elevator pitch. We've all heard that. If you get onto an elevator and somebody just says, hey, what do you do for a living? You've got 30 seconds to sell yourself. It's the same thing when it comes to change. People should be able to reiterate that story of why at a drop of a hat. Any stakeholder, any project sponsor should all be able to tell people why we're doing this and deliver the same message each time so that it's clear. They're not getting different messaging from different stakeholders or different project sponsors. And Erin talked a little bit about this as well, that the stakeholder mapping is very key to any change experience design. And going a little bit further than just who are our primary stakeholders, but what are their roles? Are they a decision maker? Are they a persuader? So maybe they don't get to decide what happens with this, but they have influence. We all know those people in our organizations, right? They may not hold a decision-making role, but they really have the ability to persuade people one way or another. You also have your observers. So maybe your project indirectly affects your finance department or HR department. They may not have a decision-making role. They may not persuade, but they're definitely going to be an observer of this project, and their opinions count too. And then lastly, you have your actual users, your consumers, those that are going to actually be involved in having to make the change or use this new solution that you're implementing. So mapping that out and also creating your story of why helps you get to creating a campaign, and I'm going to use that word very often, campaign, for your change experience. So I don't know how many times I've heard from firms and other organizations, you know, how did you communicate about this change? Well, we sent an email. Okay. And who'd you send the email to? Or where did it come from? Well, the IT department sent the email, or we had the trainers send an email. Okay, that's not going to work. Half the time, we all know what it feels like to get those emails from an IT department or a trainer. You just don't pay them much deference. And so it's important when you're looking at your communication for a change experience that it's a variety of mediums and mechanisms for which to communicate, leveraging that story of why that you created and the stakeholder mapping. I think Erin and Melissa both talked about how people change at different rates. They also receive information at different rates too. So one piece of communication might work for one subset of group of users, while another is going to work differently as well. So I've literally had firms that put posters on the back of the bathroom door when they're making a change. I mean, it can go anywhere from something as sharing out news on your SharePoint site or your intranet to sending emails maybe from somebody that's a persuader that doesn't have a direct impact into the project, but they are persuaders. And when people see their name on an email, they listen, their eyeballs perk up. So it's leveraging those different ways of communicating and mechanisms, forums. You have practice group meetings, associate meetings. Think about all of those different ways to communicate, and then put together what we call a communication matrix, which literally identifies the type of communication, the forum for that communication, the audience, and the date. And that will help you through your entire project and change experience to show how you're going to communicate about things. So a lot of times I get the question of, okay, well, you're talking all about this communication, but I mean, I'm not a marketer. I don't know how to create these robust communications. And so I always like to share the 4 C's to change communication, kind of the 4 highlights that you want to hit whenever you're communicating about a change or a project is that 1, commitment. You're committed to this. You're committed to this project. Leadership is committed to this project. It's coming from the top down. And then highlight those things around the commitment, the people around the commitment, and that you care. You care about the people. You care about the impact this is going to have on them. You care about how they feel about this. And I can't tell you how important that is. When people actually hear you say that you care, it matters and that it resonates with them, surprisingly. And last is communication. So Erin talked about transparency. That's such a huge part of any change management plan, is how you're going to communicate, but that you're going to be transparent about it and tell them, we're going to communicate with you often and as much as possible, let you know how progress is being made, instead of email, project started, email, time to go to training, email, project's over. No, we're going to communicate all along the way through our communication matrix and a variety of mediums and keep you in the loop. And then lastly, collaboration. Let them know you want them to be a part of this. Let them know you want to hear their feedback. You want them to collaborate with you on this. I love the fact that Melissa shared her story of, the document management failure. By the way, I'm with you. I had a similar experience. So soul sisters there. But anyway, collaboration is very key. They want to feel like they're a part of it. And to Melissa's story, it's, she didn't talk to anybody. They didn't talk to anybody. And that made people feel isolated. And ultimately, they didn't take part in the change because they didn't feel a part of the change. So collaboration is key as well. The other thing too is how do you target these communications, and what are some of the tenets that you want to include in these communications? And so there's 3 of them that are always good to go to. Is number 1, what do they need to know? So we know they don't need to know everything, right? We don't want to share every detail about this project with them, because then they would just lose sight of the purpose and what it is that they need to know. So we focus on those, the story of why, and the key points that they need to know about this project, the project milestones, what to expect, important dates, things like that. Secondly, what do they need to do? So both Melissa and Erin talked about, what do they need to do? What's in it for them? What is the change that they're supposed to make? That's so key to literally say that this is what we expect you to do. This is what we need you to do as part of this change. And then lastly, again, and what I think is most importantly is how do they need to feel about this? So this is going to change, just as Erin said, across organizations, and depending on the culture, every culture is different, but there is a significant emotion involved in change. People internalize it, especially if it affects their job directly. And so we want to think about how we want them to feel about this. So some common themes are that they want to feel empowered. So something's changing, but they want to feel empowered to be a part of that change. They want to feel confident that they can make the change, that they've been given the right knowledge, so they know how to make the change, and that they have action. They can take action on the change. So those are kind of 4 common themes that you can think about when you're trying to understand how your base needs to feel about this change and communicating that. And so lastly, I'll talk about kind of the end of the change management plan or implementation. It's important to continue to reinforce, refine, and communicate. Adoption and change management does not end when the project ends. And I cannot say that loud enough. In fact, I'll say it louder for those of you in the back. Adoption and change management does not end when the project ends. It has to continue throughout. You have key checkpoints you can leverage: 30, 60, 90, 100 days. Check in with the users. How's it going? What do you think? What's your feedback? Take that into consideration. Update your process, or update the technology solution based on those feedback. Refine and then communicate about it. Share that out with the rest of the group. You always have new opportunity for what we call new cohorts. Perhaps there was a whole swath of users that you didn't touch the first time around for whatever reason. You can communicate with them again, or you have a group of new hires. Whenever our associates come in, our first year associates, or new practice groups, maybe you did this practice group by practice group. There's always an opportunity to go after another subset of users to communicate about this. And then lastly, product updates. So whenever you have an update to a technology solution, it's always an advantageous time to utilize that to communicate about what it is that you want them to do, or what's so great about that technology solution. So it's cyclical. And true adoption is achieved through reinforcement of the knowledge that they learned, reinforcement of the communications that you shared, and reinforcement of success stories. That's key too, is share on other people's success with the change. So that's it for me today. I want to say thank you to all of you. My email address, you can see there in case you want to reach out to me at HBR. My team specializes in developing these change management plans and designing this experience, particularly through our business design studio. So we're always happy to talk with you a bit more about how you can develop that for your own.
Thank you, Kate, for explaining why a clear communication plan is so important. Creating a memorable why around the need for change can be difficult to hone, but is so vital to the success of a project. As expected, all 3 of you share different ways to engage our clients and colleagues that we're trying to usher forward along with our solutions. Maybe not as expected, a few themes emerged that I'd like to highlight. 1, people don't like to be told what to do. We should involve stakeholders in the decision-making process to bring them onto our side of the table and not be oppositional. 2, it's important to empathize with those whom the changes will affect. For example, how would we feel if our favorite platform was being sunset? What can we do to limit those feelings and show them how this new platform benefits them even more? And finally, 3, making sure that the light at the end of the tunnel is burning bright. Where we're going and why should be clear for everyone to see. So as we enter the Q&A portion of our time together, please send in questions through the Q&A feature. We'll shuffle through them and pull out a few for our speakers in our remaining time together. I'll kick us off with a question to the group, and I'll highlight what Amani just posted in the Q&A as well. So as Kate was just speaking about the importance of a communication strategy that gets people's attention and shows them why the organization is making a change. Do you all have examples of elevator pitches for some of your current or past projects that you can share? Or have you found success with different communication strategies that others might find helpful?
Well, Gerald, I'll jump in here because I'll use the theme of the document management project. We're starting a new document management project to upgrade our existing system. And we started with explaining, why are we doing this? And it's interesting, what is the project? The 4 Ps. The project is to, move to a new document management system that provides us with greater function and flexibility. And we need to change because the current system is just horrendous. And it's funny, when you talk about that purpose, be honest. Don't fluff around, be transparent and honest, because people, I think, appreciate that. We're going to say what we're changing. Hey, we're going to change this, and here's our time frame for it, and here's who's going to change. So we're saying, lawyers, here's what you're going to change. Practice assistants, here's what it's going to change in the next 6 to 12 months. So it's really about creating a quick, honest elevator pitch for what you really want to do, and knowing who your audience is. I'm not going to give the same elevator pitch to a practice area leader as I am perhaps to a legal assistant. So knowing your audience is very important.
Yeah, some of the things that I've saw immense success with is when you do kind of put that marketing spin on it. So in my experience, leveraging the marketing teams that you do have in-house to come up with a branded name for the project, something creative, something that they'll remember. So, a name for it, a brand around it. That's been really successful for, a lot of firms and organizations when they've embarked on a really big change. Outside of that though, like piggybacking on Melissa's document management theme, even something simple as, hey, why are we doing this? Have you ever looked for a document for a half hour and couldn't find it? And that was awful. So we're going to fix that. It's something punchy and relatable. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is making the elevator pitch relatable is key too, because any successful elevator pitch people can relate to. Oh yeah, I need that. That's a good idea. You're right. I need that. So key, just make it relatable and, to Melissa's point, transparent.
And I'm going to echo all of that. Again, I think transparency is key. I think really getting that why in there up front is very important. And to the extent that you can, give them the what's in it for them, right? What is going to be the benefit of this? And so I think that if you can start getting that in people's minds early, and again, keep it punchy, keep it relatable, know your audience, I think that really does help with success.
Empathetic. Thank you all for that. We have another question in the Q&A from Jennifer Kleiss. It says, you all have talked about change in a sense that it is changing one existing process and replacing it with another. How would your approaches change for facilitating change management in cases where something that is truly a net new is being implemented? So not an old process to a new, but something that the company, the department, the team hasn't done before. Would that change anything about your recommendations or best practices?
From a communication standpoint, no. I think all the tenets are still there, whether it's a brand new process or an existing process, focusing on what it is you want them to do, what they need to know, and how they need to feel. So even if they're not necessarily changing an old process, it's new, and there's probably something new they have to learn, which may mean they have to change something about how they do their job. So regardless if it's new or existing, there's still a change involved in it. And so particularly with the new technology platform, it may require them to do a new process, which changes their job. And so that's the change that you'd want to focus on from a communication standpoint.
And then I would say that support then becomes even more important, and getting that stakeholder agency going. I mean, you want people to feel like they're part of this. You want to be there to help assuage any fears or like any nervousness that's coming from something that's very new. And just make sure that you really are supporting them throughout that journey and making them feel like they have a piece of this and that they're a part of it.
And then I think, to echo what Erin said, is really understand those 10 aspects of change, whether it's a system, a tool, the location, compensation, managers, reporting structures. That's very real to somebody, especially if you're bringing something new that might change fundamentally how they do something. Understand that emotion and fear are very real. And by understanding those current behaviors and the current job role and how this impacts them, you can build out a change plan to support them through the process, to help them be successful.
We have another from Bart, if we can talk about human-centered design. So can we talk about how change management principles in project management might connect with human-centered design concepts, and how you engage your key stakeholders, trying to get those two very somewhat different principles and theories to connect to support adoption. Any ideas?
Yeah, so I mean, when you talk about, the human-centered design, obviously you're focusing on the person, the people, and what their experience is, or what experience it is that you want them to have. And so the key part of that is understanding that from them first and foremost. So those interviews are really important to do. And then they're a pain in the butt, and I get it. It takes a lot of time and people's schedules and such, but it's such an important thing to do, to really hear from them, what their experience is to date, what's been good and what's not been good about it. And then taking that feedback back to your stakeholder group and saying, okay, how do we build around this, particularly considering what it is that we want to do with this change? How do we consider their emotions? How do we consider what it is that they think is important as part of this project, incorporating that feedback? Because when they hear that back in the communications, it makes them feel like they're being heard, and they're more apt to want to change because they've got that intrinsic motivation. Oh, they took my idea, they took my suggestion. Look, it's there in writing on the screen. So I'd say it's the interviews are key, pivotal, before embarking on any kind of change, to make sure that you're considering their experiences.
And I think it's really important, because I think human-centered design focuses on empathy and understanding the problem that we need to solve. I had an experience years ago when I was doing consulting work, and we were working with a large national healthcare provider. And we were trying to get them to move from literally enrolling Medicare patients by paper. This was not that long ago, they were using paper. And they said, this one woman, she knows it all. She holds the keys to everything. And she kept insisting, you can't do it online. Seniors won't understand. Seniors won't understand. And the more that we met with her, the more that we talked to her, the problem wasn't the paper. The problem was her fear. The problem was her department's fear. They feared being outsourced. They feared that they wouldn't have jobs. They feared that they would lose touch with their end customers, the senior citizens, and that a tool could not replace them. So I think empathy is the umbrella that goes over all change management, human-centered design, and project management. If you can understand a human's problems and you walk in their shoes, you're better positioned to solve them.
100%. Couldn't have said it better, Melissa. And that emotion is so, I had a similar experience where I was working with a firm and we were replacing a billing system, and we had somebody that was very resistant. And by, really digging in and talking to her, it was the same thing. She was afraid her job was going to be eliminated. Well, if we do this, what do they need me for? And that really hit me, like, yeah, of course you would feel that way. Even recently, working on a panel convergence program, we talked to the key stakeholders, and they were fearful of losing those key relationships that they had with outside counsel, and how would that impact the services that they provided. And so really addressing that concern in their meetings helped so much to allay their fears and get them on board.
I do think fear is a big part of changing. I mean, when you're changing stuff for people and you're getting them out of their comfort zone, there's a lot of that there. So I completely agree with Melissa. The empathy is very important. I mean, being able to sit there and listen to people, make them feel like they're actually being heard. And I loved Kate's talk about then actually like echoing that in your communications so that they will see like, oh yeah, like somebody actually did listen to me. And even though this is scary, I'm not alone in this anymore. And so I think, yeah, empathy is very important.
So as we look to wrap up, I have one final question for the panelists as we look to provide some practical guidance to the audience. What is the one resource you'd recommend to the audience to continue learning and why?
I'll share that if ProSci, I went through the ProSci change management program, and I can't even begin to tell you the dividends that it has paid for the way I look at projects, the way I approach projects. And it's just a great program. There's a tremendous amount of resources, so prosci.com.
And I would say knowledge management for lawyers is a great resource. I know it's not specifically on change management, but a lot of the principles that are in here, I feel like are echoed in everything that we talked about today. And it really helps you set up programs, get the leadership support, think about your comms plan. So that would be my recommendation.
And my recommendation is obviously going to be a shameless plug. So much of what I've learned is from the colleagues that I've worked with, both at HBR and at Bold Duck Studio, particularly Bold Duck Studio. They are experts in the human-centered design and process design around the human element. And so I would recommend you reach out to them to learn more, or myself or someone at HBR, because that's where I've learned so much as well.
And I'll support Kate, and this is not a plug. I don't work for Bold Duck. I've worked with Bold Duck, and they are an outstanding group that will push your comfort zones, will force you to look at things different ways, and help you find better solutions. And so, not a shameless plug. They're great.
Thank you.
I also happen to love Bold Duck. Work with them. So yes, I echo both Kate and Melissa on that.
Bold Duck getting a lot of free advertising. Yes. I love it. They're great. So thank you all once again to our speakers today. What a great practical presentation. And thanks to you all, our attendees as well. Your engagement is much appreciated. Just a reminder, there is a brief survey that will be available to you after the close of our webinar. To take the survey after this call, please follow the prompts that will appear when you close this webinar. We will also be emailing that survey to you within the next few days. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today and for taking the survey, which allows us to provide you with informative webinars such as these. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you again for attending.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.